Why are the FNCS champions fighting over at Battlewood Boulevard? How did Akiira and Kurama win the Divisional Cup, and what went wrong for MrSavage and Veno? All of that and more in the EU review. So the Divisional Cup is officially over, and usually I'd start by talking about the winners, but I have to discuss what happened over at Battlewood Boulevard. If you've been watching EU over the past few months, you'll know that Sky and Skrull have locked down North Battlewood as their POI. They defeated everyone who tried to contest them in the previous Divisional Cups, and they were able to get the spot completely uncontested for the FNCS Grand Finals, which they of course went on to win in style. They are the best duo in the world right now, and they definitely earned the right to be uncontested through their performances. They of course beat Chino and Pablo off spawn in Game 11 of that FNCS Grand Finals, further proving that they are not to be messed with. However, Veno and Curve won FNCS over on NA Central from the exact same spot, and with them coming to EU, there was always going to be drama about who took the drop. Now Sky and Skrull seemed happy to have the north side whilst letting Veno and Curve take the south. They were more than happy to split the POI, but Veno and Curve had other ideas. They spent the whole cup trying to fight Sky and Skrull, trying to lurk on them, trying to make them as uncomfortable as possible in their own drop. And this ultimately cost Sky and Skrull what could have been a Divisional Cup win. Let's break down how their tournament went. In Game 2, their plans were interfered with when they were lurked on by Roban and Axforce, and then in Game 4 the same thing happened. Twy was bush camping and was able to take out Sky. These guys definitely did not have everything go their way. However, they were making the most out of their routine games. They were first at the halfway point. It was looking like they could be in with a shout of winning the Divisional Cup, and then Veno and Curve took the conditioning to a whole new level. They keyed them in Game 5, defeating them early off spawn, completely ending their game, and then in Game 6 they fought them again, taking out Skrull and leaving Sky as a solo. Now interestingly, there was quite a discrepancy between the two teams' placements. Sky and Skrull managed a respectable 5th place, while Veno and Curve were only able to finish in 20th, and it's fair to say that one team were trying to play the tournament to win, the other team were just trying to condition. Whilst Veno and Curve definitely made an impact on Sky and Skrull, and certainly they have changed the course of how this Battlewood dynamic is going to go down, they didn't actually play that well. They did fly too close to the sun a few times. They were playing very aggressively, and ultimately that did cost them. Indeed, in that final game where they took out Sky, they actually ended up getting outplaced by the Danish duo. I mean, all things considered, I think Sky and Skrull did great to manage a 5th place when you consider all the carnage that was going on at their POI. Veno and Curve obviously played the tournament a little bit differently. They tried to play like main characters, but they ended up with extras placement. It did feel like they were doing a bit too much. Yes, I know they're conditioning for the Summit Land. Yes, I know that they weren't too interested in actually winning the tournament, but there is a little bit of a balance to be achieved, and they didn't really look like they were going to challenge at any point. Depending on your perspective, this was either a very smart long-term play from Veno and Curve, or it was just poor Fortnite. Despite any of this though, they have certainly made a huge impact over at Battlewood Boulevard. Sky and Skrull will no longer be able to go about their game plans uninterrupted. They will need to adapt, and they will need to strategize. But to conclude, it doesn't really feel like there were any winners in this situation. Sky and Skrull had the better placement, but they succumbed to Veno and Curve in the actual fights. They won the battle today, but will they lose the war at the Summit Land? It will be interesting to see how the Summit Land does go down. Potentially the two duos will be able to exist a little bit more harmoniously, but it does seem like Veno and Curve do not want Sky and Skrull to get comfortable. Veno and Curve certainly did do a good job of conditioning and making themselves known as a threat, and it's fair to say that the situation over at Battlewood Boulevard has just changed drastically. Now there's actually one extra team in the Battlewood Boulevard story, and that is the Divisional Cup winners Akiira and Kurama. After so many consistently good placements, they finally have their Div Cup win. It all came together on the day. They landed at the split south of Battlewood Boulevard, and they were able to get great loot. They caught the Midas flopper in 4 out of the 6 games, so they were able to enjoy gold loadouts, and they were doing so well. Akiira had the most damage and the most eliminations. These guys were constantly looking like a threat. They won Game 1. Akiira hit a beautiful 1v2 against Focus and Thomas HD. Going into the last game, they were sat in 3rd place, 43 points off Focus and Thomas HD in 1st, but they were able to have a strong finish and close out the tournament win. Now, unlike Veno and Curve, these guys were not concerned about conditioning. They purely wanted to win the tournament, and it did show from their performance. Yes, they will have to make it through the lower bracket at the Summit Land, but these guys will definitely be throwing a spanner in the works over at Battlewood Boulevard. If you don't know, their preferred drop spot is South Battlewood, although if they keep catching Midas floppers in every game, maybe that could change, but what that does mean is that they could be contesting Veno and Curve at the Summitland finals. Now, Veno and Curve have said that they would drop down to the lower bracket and 6-0 Akiira and Kurama if they landed on them in any tournaments, and we did see that Akiira and Kurama chose a different spot, but this turned out to be an advantage. They played their own game, they didn't concern themselves with what anyone was doing, and it led to them putting in a great performance. Perhaps the key moment of the whole tournament was when Akiira and Kurama beat Veno and Curve in a mid-game fight during the 5th game. This felt so pivotal. It felt like Akiira and Kurama were saying, we can hang with you guys, we are here and we are not to be messed with. They're certainly not a team to be underestimated by any means. Yes, the FNCS Grand Finals was disappointing for them. They only managed a 37th place finish, but they came right back into form in the second chance qualifier, finishing in first in that with 3 out of 6 game wins, a dominant performance. And it's fair to say that French Fortnite has never looked more back, as you're about to see a couple of other francophone teams did very well. Of course, they are also a double controller duo, and it's so good to see controller players doing well, especially on a region like EU where traditionally it has been dominated by keyboard and mouse players. It's interesting because I remember that a few months ago I said that Akiira and Kurama were better players than Reet, and that didn't get a lot of support if I'm honest, but I feel like now that opinion has been kind of vindicated because Akiira and Kurama are just looking so good. Listen, Akiira and Kurama are a duo that have worked so hard over the past few months. During the off season they were earning in practically every victory cup regardless of the region. It's nice to see that the hard work has paid off. This was their breakout performance and we can now regard them as one of the top duos in EU. In second place we had Focus and Thomas HD, and they had a crazy start to the tournament. Inside the first 4 matches they had 2 wins and a second place. It was genuinely their tournament to win, and I think they'll be pretty disappointed that they weren't able to get it over the line. They had 2 disappointing final games and they ended up being beaten out by Akiira and Kurama. Finally they had some favourable zones after weeks and weeks of suffering, and they were able to put a performance in, backing up all their talk. They didn't get the win, but a second is still a very impressive performance. They also managed to play high in 3 out of the 6 games, so fair play to them for that. In third place we had Chap and Flixie, and I've got 3 words to say: it's about time. They might finally be back. It was only in yesterday's video but I talked about how they've not lived up to expectations, how I would have expected way better placements from them considering their quality, but this was a great performance and a nice step in the right direction. It does remain that they did underperform in the FNCS Grand Finals, only managing a 17th place, and they of course did not qualify for the Reload Elite Series finals either, but can they peak at just the right time before the Summit LAN? It could be on the cards. Running down the rest of the leaderboard, in 4th place we have another French duo of Podesai and Sato. They were contested by iDrop and Marius at their split, and they didn't lose once off spawn to them. iDrop and Marius actually came in dead last with 0 points, so very disappointing for them, but Podesai and Sato taking full advantage, and credit to them for doing so well. In 5th place we of course had Sky and Scroll. We then had Cringe and Volko in 6th place. These guys are very consistent. They only had 1 game where they didn't finish inside the top 15, so they were just looking good all throughout. Their drop actually got nerfed a bit in the latest update, but they didn't let that affect them, and a 6th is very solid. We had another German duo, Vidil and Jew, come in 7th. Yapko and Panzer in 8th place. They started the tournament out excellently with a 3rd and a 4th place. It was a little bit ropier towards the end, but still solid from them. Vico and Malabuka finished in 9th. They were the reigning champions. It was not as good a performance as last week. It felt like they really struggled to stay alive together during the end games, but ultimately they still finished inside the top 10, so not terrible by any means. And in 10th place we had Kami and Hari, yet again not finishing in a bad position, but just not challenging for the win like they should be. Now in terms of the big duos that finished outside of the top 10, we had MrSavage and Velo in 16th place, and it's hard to know where to gauge this performance. On the one hand, it was very impressive. After 2 games they were in 2nd place, and that was all whilst being contested over at Scribbly Shores, so they started out really well and then they kind of faded a bit. Their off-spawn performances left a lot to be desired. Yes, they were winning more than they were losing, but it is a spot where you can be third-partied very easily, and that is what happened. Skyjump and Mumsy were constantly coming over to Scribbly Shores. I have to say I wasn't overly impressed with some of their strategies. They did some interesting glides where they were lucky not to get shot out of the air. There were a couple of fights where they left each other isolated. You can see here that Velo runs over some double edits, and that does ultimately cost them this game. Listen, outside of the first 2 matches they weren't too great. Yes, of course they were contested, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more from them, and it does feel like a missed opportunity not being able to break into that top 10. There is a very real chance that they will be contested in the Summit LAN, and if I'm honest, I do think they need to work on their off spawn a little bit more. If they can start winning the fights quicker, if they can win them cleaner, then they'll be less at risk from the third parties and they'll be able to play out their game more successfully. But listen, there were some promising signs from Savage and Velo in this tournament, and fair play to them for the first 2 games. In terms of other big duos, we had Chino and Pablo Wingu finish in 19th place. They lost 2 games because they died off spawn. They were triple contested over at Sandy Strip. Swizzy and Pixie also ended up being contested over at Dark Dominion by Truly and Gonzo. They only lost in 2 games, but they were only able to secure a 33rd place. And finally, all the duos over at Wonky Land did struggle. We had all of them finish in the bottom half of the leaderboard, none of them able to have a great performance. And finally, we did have some European teams perform well in the NA Central Divisional Cup. Vico and Scroll were able to beat Booga in an off-spawn battle, and they later went one better by securing a win in Game 4, so huge credit to them. What's even more interesting is that they weren't even the highest placing European duo. They managed a 22nd place finish, but King Cringe and Twy placed in 14th. They are always so good on high ping, so fair play to them. Subscribe to stay up to date with European Fortnite news. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.